Hey there, fellow Potterheads. Buckle up because today we're diving into plot holes, or more accurately, things J.K. Rowling made look like plot holes, but actually make sense with a little magical logic. We're talking about Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. It's an awesome start to the series, but even this magical story has a few head-scratchers. Let's explore some of the most puzzling points and what might really be going on. One big theory is that the protections around the Philosopher's Stone weren't actually meant to be unbeatable at all. They were a delay tactic. In other words, they were never about locking the stone away forever. They were designed to slow down any intruder just long enough for Dumbledore to step in and save the day. Sure, the obstacles seem laughably simple. Come on, a game of chess guarding something as powerful as the stone? But maybe that was intentional. Think about it. Dumbledore was a genius. He knew human nature, magic, and strategy better than anyone. What if these weak defenses weren't a mistake, but a carefully crafted plan? The idea was simple. If someone tried to steal the stone, the defenses wouldn't stop them completely. They'd just hold them off. That extra time would give Dumbledore a chance to figure out what was going on and intervene. The fact that a group of first years could get through wasn't a failure. It was by design. Let's compare that to the protections in the Horcrux cave. Those defenses were brutal and merciless. Every step was packed with lethal curses, poison, and traps meant to destroy anyone who dared to get close. It wasn't a puzzle or a test. It was a death trap. Voldemort's goal was to make sure no one survived the attempt. And his magic was all about fear and control. This contrast shows two totally different approaches. For the Philosopher's Stone, the protections were more like a time delay system, giving Dumbledore the upper hand. They weren't designed to block every possible intruder, just to slow them down and send a signal. Dumbledore likely figured that if anyone dangerous tried to steal the stone, the defenses would stall them just enough for him to swoop in. It's like he turned the obstacles into a giant magical alarm system. And while the stone's protections were fairly forgiving, the Horcrux cave was the opposite. Voldemort didn't want to delay people, he wanted them dead. The cave's defenses were absolutely lethal, with no room for error or escape. Every detail reflected Voldemort's obsession with power, and his belief that the only way to protect something was to make it untouchable. Dumbledore's setup, on the other hand, was all about balance. The protections around the stone weren't meant to be permanent locks, but tools to delay an alert. They weren't weak. They were just designed for a different purpose. Instead of trying to make the stone completely unreachable, Dumbledore trusted his own ability to step in at the right moment. You can even think of it like this. The stone's protections were less about keeping the intruder out, and more about keeping them in. They were like a magical trap, meant to hold anyone suspicious in place long enough for Dumbledore to catch them. And the fact that the obstacles tested intelligence and bravery, that might have been deliberate, too, a way to filter out the truly dangerous from the merely curious. Voldemort, though, took the opposite approach. The Horcrux cave wasn't about catching intruders. It was about punishing them. The second you stepped into that cave, you were playing by his rules. One wrong move and you were done. The defenses there weren't about buying time, they were about ending the threat immediately. So maybe those easy protections around the Philosopher's Stone weren't so easy after all. They were part of a much bigger plan, one that relied on Dumbledore's quick thinking and unmatched skill. The obstacles weren't there to keep out every thief, they were there to make sure the right thief got caught. What do you think? Were the stone's protections a genius move by Dumbledore, or do they still feel like a bit of a plot hole? Let's hear your thoughts. Alright, let's dive into this one. Professor Quirrell. How did no one figure out he was up to something? Quirrell is such a fascinating character in Philosopher's Stone. He shows up all twitchy, stammering, and basically radiating nervous energy. Everyone thinks, oh, poor guy, must have had a tough year. But if you stop and really look at his story, it's packed with layers, especially when you factor in Dumbledore's role. Let's break it down. Before Hogwarts, Quirrell wasn't some awkward mess. The guy was actually pretty sharp. He was known for being bright, ambitious, and skilled in defense against the dark arts. Then, for some reason, he decided it'd be a good idea to go looking for Voldemort. Maybe he thought he could learn from him, or even outsmart him. Huge mistake. Voldemort saw Quirrell's ambition and said, "Perfect, I'll take over your body now, thanks." Just like that, Quirrell went from a curious scholar to Voldemort's puppet. When he came back to Hogwarts, he wasn't the same guy. The stuttering, the sweaty hands, the constant jumpiness, it wasn't just nerves. Voldemort was slowly draining his strength and willpower. But here's where it gets tricky. Dumbledore. How did he not notice that Quirrell, a once confident wizard, returned looking like he'd been through a war? Spoiler alert, he probably did notice. Dumbledore wasn't oblivious. This is the man who could sense trouble from a mile away. He must have realized something was off with Quirrell. But instead of confronting him outright, Dumbledore likely played the long game. Why? Because he knew Voldemort was involved. If he acted too soon, Voldemort could have slipped away and gone back into hiding, which would have made things even worse. So Dumbledore kept an eye on Quirrell, letting him carry out his plans while carefully steering things from behind the scenes. Think about it. Quirrell sneaking around the castle, fumbling through the stone's protections, and avoiding certain staff members, looking at you, Snape. Dumbledore definitely noticed. But rather than stepping in, he let Quirrell dig himself deeper into trouble, waiting for the perfect moment to act. And here's the thing. Quirrell's cover story wasn't entirely unbelievable. He'd been off traveling for a year, supposedly researching dangerous magical creatures. So, when he came back acting all skittish, people chalked it up to a bad encounter with, say, a dragon or a troll. No one would have jumped straight to, "Oh, Voldemort's living on the back of his head." That's just not something you expect. That said, Quirrell's behavior was shady. He avoided Snape, kept lingering around the third-floor corridor, and generally gave off "something's not right" vibes. And that's where Snape comes in. Snape. Love him or hate him, the man had a gift for spotting trouble. From day one, you know he was side-eyeing Quirrell hard. Snape wasn't about to fall for the whole harmless, nervous professor act. That's why, during the Quidditch match, Snape was muttering that counter-curse while Quirrell was trying to hex Harry's broom. At the time, it seemed like Snape was just being his usual unpleasant self. But really, he was protecting Harry. And Snape didn't stop there. Remember the Forbidden Forest scene where Quirrell was supposedly investigating the unicorn attack? Snape was there too, lurking in the shadows. Coincidence? Not a chance. Snape was tailing Quirrell, trying to figure out what he was up to. The problem? He didn't have proof. Snape didn't know Voldemort was literally attached to the back of Quirrell's head, because who would? And accusing him without solid evidence might have backfired. So Snape kept his suspicions quiet and tried to block Quirrell's plans whenever he could. Now here's a fun theory. What if Snape and Dumbledore were working together? Dumbledore might have told Snape to keep an eye on Quirrell while he focused on the bigger picture. Snape, for all his grumpiness and snide remarks, was fiercely loyal to Dumbledore, and to his role as Harry's protector. While Dumbledore played puppet master behind the scenes, Snape was on the ground, watching Quirrell like a hawk. Every time Quirrell tried something, whether it was sneaking into the third-floor corridor or hexing Harry, Snape was there to counteract it. It's no wonder Quirrell's plans didn't get far. By the time everything came to a head in the underground chamber, it was already game over for Quirrell. Voldemort had used him up, and his plans had fallen apart thanks to Dumbledore, Snape, and even Harry and his friends. Looking back, Quirrell's story is honestly pretty tragic. He wasn't evil, just arrogant and foolish. He thought he could study Voldemort, maybe even use him for his own gain in the defense against the dark arts. Instead, he got completely taken over, losing himself in the process. By the end, he wasn't even in control of his own actions. Dumbledore, for his part, likely saw this and made a calculated choice. He could have acted sooner, but doing so might have let Voldemort escape. Instead, he let events play out, ensuring that Voldemort's plan was revealed and ultimately thwarted. Alright, let's dive into another plot hole and theory about the Invisibility Cloak's suspiciously perfect timing. Because, let's be real, Dumbledore doesn't do anything without a reason, right? What if the timing wasn't just luck or coincidence, but part of Dumbledore's grand plan? Let me walk you through this step by step. So, picture this. It's Christmas at Hogwarts. Harry's had a rough few months adjusting to the wizarding world, surviving a troll and finding out he's famous. Then, bam! A mysterious gift shows up on Christmas morning. A super rare, ancient invisibility cloak that once belonged to his dad, paired with a cryptic note saying, "Use it well." On the surface, it seems like a nice sentimental gift. But come on, this is Dumbledore we're talking about. You think he's just handing out family heirlooms for the sake of nostalgia? Not a chance. The timing screams of strategy. Dumbledore wasn't just being generous, he was subtly steering Harry toward the Philosopher's Stone mystery. By Christmas, Dumbledore must have known something was up with Quirrell. Maybe Snape had already started dropping hints, or maybe Dumbledore's instincts were tingling. He's always 3 steps ahead, after all. And what better way to give Harry those to uncover the truth than by arming him with an invisibility cloak? But why then? Why not give it to Harry the day he arrived at Hogwarts? Because Dumbledore knew Harry needed time. Time to settle into the wizarding world, bond with Ron and Hermione, and gain some confidence. Dropping the cloak too early might have distracted him. By Christmas, though, Harry was ready, curious, brave, and itching to explore. Let's break down how perfectly the cloak fits into the story. 1. Harry uses the cloak to sneak into the restricted section. The first time he uses it, he's poking around the library to learn more about Nicholas Flamel. Without it, Filch would have caught him in about 5 seconds, and the whole investigation might have been derailed. Number 2. The cloak leads Harry to the Mirror of Erised, which becomes crucial to how he later retrieves the stone. Dumbledore even catches Harry at the mirror and uses the moment to plant a seed, the idea that the mirror is tied to selflessness. Coincidence? Not a chance. 3. Throughout their adventures, the cloak is the ultimate get-out-of-trouble card. Without it, sneaking past teachers Filch and Peeves would have been next to impossible. It's almost like Dumbledore knew Harry would need it, not just to survive, but to succeed. Here's a question, though. Why Christmas? Maybe Dumbledore wanted to give Harry a nudge toward investigating the stone. By then, Harry had overheard snippets about Fluffy and the third-floor corridor, and he was starting to piece things together. Giving Harry the cloak at Christmas was like handing him a map halfway through a treasure hunt. It's also worth considering that Dumbledore might have wanted to test Harry. The cloak isn't just a tool, it's a temptation. Would Harry use it wisely or abuse its power? By Christmas, Harry had shown enough maturity to prove he was ready for such a powerful artifact. Now let's zoom out for a second. The Invisibility Cloak isn't just any magical object. It's one of the Deathly Hallows, a cloak that even Death himself can't see through. Dumbledore, who's obsessed with the Hallows, definitely knew what the cloak was capable of. Giving it to Harry wasn't just about solving the stone mystery. It was about preparing Harry for his greater destiny. By introducing the cloak early, Dumbledore was laying the groundwork for Harry to understand the significance of the Hallows later. It's a small piece of a much larger puzzle, and Dumbledore's all about playing the long game. Let's imagine an alternate timeline where Harry doesn't get the cloak at Christmas. Things would have gone very differently. Harry wouldn't have found the Mirror of Erised or learned its lesson, making it impossible to retrieve the stone. The trio would have been caught sneaking around multiple times, possibly leading to them being expelled. Voldemort might have succeeded in stealing the stone before Dumbledore returned from the Ministry. In short, the cloak wasn't just a helpful tool, it was a game changer. Without it, the entire outcome of the book might have been different. Immersive stuff. There's been a few fascinating thoughts put out there in this episode. What do you think? Are these things plot holes, or has J.K. Rowling been an absolute genius in her work, wanting us, the readers, to consider things more deeply? Well, that's a wrap for this episode. Thanks for tuning in to Theories and More, your hub for uncovering the deepest lore and wildest theories. Be sure to check out our other videos, from hidden magical secrets to untold character stories. Until next time, keep your wands at the ready and your minds open. This is Theories and More, signing off. Mischief managed.